Funky beginning, right? You like that new music? We went into a new year, a little new intro, and a lot of new things to come. Good morning to you. It is 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and we are in studio today because we have a really fantastic guest for you. He is the author of a book called Vegas Concierge. We're going to talk about sex and human trafficking, corruption in government and in America, as well as hip-hop music and all the ties to that. This is a fascinating read, and I know a lot of you like to be turned on to different books. This is one you're going to want to get, whether it's on audio or you're actually going to be holding it or you put it on your Kindle, whatever, but you will have a hard time putting it down. This guy that we're going to speak to, his name is Brian Joseph. He actually attended University of Missouri, Columbia, so he has ties to our area. And today, actually tonight, you'll get an opportunity to see him and talk with him in a Q&A as an event that's going to take place at the Jewish Community Center. So we'll talk more about that. He will be on with us very soon. I want to welcome all of you. Feel free to say good morning. Let us know where you're watching from, if you are in our immediate area or outside. And if you are outside of our area, in states and countries away, do me a favor and let me know how you found us. Was it organically? Or did someone ask you to watch the show that's bringing you more of what you need in this world? Hope, positivity, motivation, again, things that serve you. We have a woman who watches us regularly that is in the UK, and I love the fact that we are reaching all over the place. Thanks to you, this show continues to grow, and you're going to see a lot over the coming weeks about what you've allowed us to do and some really major changes to come. That's all I'm going to say so far, but there's a lot of really exciting things for 2025, and it's all thanks to you. Well, tomorrow we'll have our aspiring meteorologist Beckett Moore on, but we do want to give you some weather if you're in our immediate area. Stick with us if you're just outside of it because you do not want to miss today's show. What you'll notice is you're stepping out and it is much warmer than it was yesterday. A lot of you in the 30s, our high today, 42, and that sun that you're seeing is going to help melt things, and that is so needed with all of the snow and ice that we got. Down to 29 tonight. Now, we're going to keep an eye on tomorrow. 51 for the high. However, we do have a 70% chance now of evening rain. There was original talk earlier in the week that it could turn into some snow flurries. It could be a mix. Looks like that's being taken out. As Beckett had told you earlier in the week, he didn't feel confident that we would see snow. So a lot of rain, but it's going to be breezy and cold for the next few days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Look at Sunday and Monday's highs. Only in the teens. That's just crazy. On Martin Luther King Day and Inauguration Day, it will only get to 17 with a low of 6. So cold. And then you can see the next chance of snow coming. That will be on Thursday. Again, it's still pretty far out, so that could change. A 30% chance of snow coming on Thursday, but it's going to be warmer Wednesday going in through Saturday of next week. Mid-30s and then up to the mid-40s. So it's kind of an up and down ride for us over the next several days. Well, we give you the news you can use, and a lot of people yesterday may have watched the final speech by President Biden. One of the things he talked about was the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. However, from that point last night and into the overnight hours, there's been a monkey wrench that has been thrown into this. A last-minute crisis with Hamas was holding up the Israeli approval of a long-awaited agreement to pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip and release dozens of hostages. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes killed dozens of people across the war-ravaged territory. Netanyahu's office said his cabinet won't meet to approve the agreement until Hamas backs down, accusing it of reneging on parts of the agreement in an attempt to gain further concessions. Well, that was one of the things that President Biden talked about last night in his final speech to America as he ends his presidency and Donald Trump comes in. Again, the inauguration of Donald Trump is coming on Monday. Biden used his farewell address to the nation to deliver stark warnings about an oligarchy of the ultra-wealthy taking root in the country and a tech industrial complex that is infringing on Americans' rights and the future of democracy. But he did ask for connection in our country, looking for peace as there is the handoff. So again, President Biden in the Oval Office for the final address. Well, we are 2 days away from something we've been talking about for many years now, a possible ban on TikTok. Will this happen? There's a lot of information that you'll see day in and day out leading up to Sunday. Barring action by the Supreme Court, a ban on the popular app in the U.S. is set to begin on Sunday. Many, though, are saying Donald Trump could save it. China is saying they're considering Elon Musk as a buyer. Now, TikTok is considering its options, including a last-ditch possibility that it goes dark Sunday, though that could also allow the app to remain active, but without future updates and bug fixes. The law in question required ByteDance, that's TikTok's China-based owner, to divest from the company, find an outside buyer to take over within 9 months. That window closes on Sunday. Now, the law also gives the president the authority to grant a one-time 90-day extension if, in fact, significant progress has been made toward the divestment. Well, red dye number 3, it's in a lot of food that you've eaten for a long, long time. We're talking about candies, cookies, cakes going away. And what will manufacturers use now to continue making that food? Well, some people are talking about beet juice, others talking about purple sweet potatoes. It shows up in a lot of food. U.S. regulators yesterday banned the dye called Red 3 from the nation's food supply nearly 35 years after it was barred from cosmetics. Why? Because of potential cancer risk. The FDA officials granted a 2022 petition filed by 24 food safety and health advocates that urge the agency to revoke authorization for the substance. It gives some candies, some snack cakes, and maraschino cherries a bright red hue. The agency said it was taking the action as a matter of law because some studies have found that the dye caused cancer in lab rats. Food manufacturers will have until January of 2027 to remove the dye from their products, while makers of ingested drugs have until January of 2028 to do the exact same. Other countries will still allow for certain uses of the dye. However, imported foods must meet the new U.S. requirement. Well, do you drink those energy drinks? They're not for me, but I know a lot of you, a lot of kids in college, they do it just to be able to wake up after studying late at night. There's a new one that's going to come on the market, and it actually has ties right here to St. Louis. Anheuser-Busch and First Form are joining a partnership. This bringing together two American manufacturers with proud St. Louis roots and complementary expertise. The CEO of First Form said, by combining our strengths with Anheuser-Busch's experience in beverage innovation and scale, we look forward to creating a new wave of energy and other beverages. The partnership's initial energy product is expected to come to market by summer of this year and to be distributed by Anheuser-Busch's best-in-class network of wholesaler partners. Blue Origin launching its massive new rocket on its first test flight today, sending up a prototype satellite to orbit thousands of miles above Earth. Named after the first American to orbit Earth, the New Glenn rocket blasted off from Florida, soaring from the same pad used to launch NASA's Mariner and Pioneer spacecraft about a half a century ago. Years in the making, with heavy funding by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, the 320-foot rocket carried an experimental platform designed to host satellites or release them into their proper orbits. All 7 main engines fired at liftoff as the rocket blazed through the pre-dawn sky to the delight of spectators lining nearby beaches. Company employees erupted in cheers and frenzied applause once the craft successfully reached orbit 13 minutes later. It's a feat, by the way, that drew quick praise from none other than SpaceX's Elon Musk. And of course, that's competition for Elon. Well, folks, do you know what happened 25 years ago? I can't believe it's been 25 years. It's, in my career, one of my favorite things I ever had a chance to cover. The only time St. Louis ever hosted an NFL championship game, and that was for the Rams. And then they, of course, went on to play in Atlanta and eventually win the Super Bowl against the Tennessee Titans. The final score, of course, and that was 23-16. We're talking about some big days in history. We go from that to doubling it. 50 years ago, Saturday Night Live debuted. I cannot believe it's been 50 years. Die Hard fans, you're going to get what you want. A look back at some iconic skits, behind the scenes, the legendary sketch show celebrating the Big 5-0 with a 3-hour live primetime special in February. The legendary sketch show, which premiered October 11th, 1975, celebrating its anniversary early by serving SNL fans a feast of abundance. And there are documentaries featuring never-before-seen footage, dozens of new interviews, a curated YouTube playlist with highlights from every season, a movie about the show's origins available to stream. There's an exciting fan experience in New York, a new biography on the show's creator hitting shelves, and a 3-hour live primetime special with an overflow of beloved cast members, fan favorite guest hosts, and much more. Whether you watch this live today or watch this later, let me know what has stood out for you in Saturday Night Live over the last 50 years. Who have been your favorites? For me, goes back to Eddie Murphy. The Gumby skits were always some of my favorites. And of course, loved Will Ferrell. There's so many more. I mean, you look back and you probably forget some of the people who showed up on SNL in the last 50 years. Well, there's the news you can use. We are going to get into a very serious topic that I want you to start spreading with your followers. Again, right now we're live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. And then we'll turn some stories and reels that will pop up on Instagram, TikTok, until it possibly goes and gets banned. And we want to spread this information and awareness about human trafficking. Now, a lot of people believe that this happens on the mean streets in major cities. The name of the book that we're going to talk about is Vegas Concierge, and it's by the author Brian Joseph. So you think about Las Vegas and Sin City, and you say, yeah, well, that's where it happens, those major cities. Folks, right here in St. Louis, in rural areas, in small towns. In fact, there are people who say that St. Louis is a hub for this. We're going to talk about the corruption. Brian Joseph will be in the blue chair when we return. He wants to say, I can't believe I took your son's life. I don't know what I was thinking. I have so much regret and remorse. I've changed my life. Would you accept that apology?
I've never thought of that. Yeah, I would.
Do you think, because you talk about forgiveness, do you think that you all can ever forgive one another and come back together?
It wasn't just right. I'm not perfect. Just because my name is Bush, I don't have it all figured out. And I think they know that too.
I was cyclically depressed, so I could be the happiest person you ever met at 11 a.m. I could be on cloud 9, and by 7 p.m. that evening, I'd be sitting on a couch with a gun in my hand and thinking hard not to get emotional. I
never feel sorry for being emotional.
I really, I was at a space to where I couldn't believe that I had brought my children into this.
Where's the light? Because many of you probably feel that there's this darkness and there's this thunder cloud that's constantly over you. This family has dealt with so much.
So our journey is our journey. There has to be purpose in this pain. There has to be something more powerful. I have to find something to be blessed about every day. I have to count my blessings and have gratitude every single day.
Welcome back. It is 7:15, and thanks for tuning in to The Real Monica Adams Show. I am your host, Monica Adams. I know some of you get an opportunity to watch the show live. Others, you take pieces of this. You have to run off to work. But this is one you're going to want to definitely come back to and then pass this around to all of your followers. We'll be also turning some stories and reels, so look for those later as well. What we're going to talk about today is not talked about enough. And there are people behind the scenes with the whisperers, and then it's the turning the deaf ear, or this doesn't happen in my area. Oh, today's going to be alarming to you. I'm going to tell you that right now. The author of Vegas Concierge. We're going to talk about human trafficking. We're going to talk about hip hop. We're going to talk about corruption in America. All of that you'll find on the title of his book. Brian Joseph, my guest this morning. Welcome in. I thank you so much for coming in early.
Thanks for having me.
So I said, have you been to St. Louis? Well, sure, you made the trip. You went to University of Missouri, Columbia.
I did.
So MIZ.
COU.
Thank you. Yes, yes, I went there as well. So very, very proud of their J school, their journalism school. You went on to become an investigative journalist, a reporter for the last 2 decades.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I've cut my teeth at Missouri.
Yes, well, thank you. We're proud to have you after reading. So I haven't had a chance to finish the entire book. I stayed up and read about 70 pages last night and could not put it down. So a lot of you will find the exact same thing. There you go. Vegas Concierge, Sex Trafficking, Hip Hop, and Corruption in America. How many times have you heard, Brian, that only happens in something like Sin City, in the major cities? It doesn't happen in rural towns or small town America.
No, there's a huge misperception that this is somehow limited to either faraway places or our largest metropolises, and that's absolutely not correct. This is an affliction that affects everywhere in America.
Do they say that because their hope is that it's not happening and that their young girls and their young sons are all going to be okay? They can walk around streets. They're not going to have any problems because, again, that doesn't happen here.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that folks just don't understand this issue. This is an issue that is definitely at the margins, one that a lot of people don't want to listen to or hear about, and it's one that there's a lot of misunderstandings about what is truly involved here.
What made you want to tackle this subject?
It was sort of a chance encounter. I was interviewing for a job at the time, and an editor sort of mentioned I had previously written about foster care and said, well, if you'd written about foster care, maybe you'd be interested in writing about human trafficking. And I immediately saw the connections between the two issues, both marginalized populations, both populations that policymakers and the public don't think about. And I thought, well, if I've succeeded in writing about foster care, maybe I'll be able to write about human trafficking victims and survivors as well. And there are indeed some similarities in how you report on those two populations, but also a lot of differences as well.
And is this your hope? And by the way, Brian is going to be at an event tonight that we'll tell you about. It's being held at the J. Tickets are still available for this, by the way. It's 7 o'clock this evening, the J in Creve Coeur. The event is sponsored by the National Council for Jewish Women. There's all the information you need. Michelle also dropping it in to comments for you. I did look last night. Tickets still available for this at the Performing Arts Center. This is an opportunity for a Q&A, and truly eye-opening. Is your hope, as people read this and come to the event tonight, that it gets us talking about this more?
Absolutely. Once I learned more and more about human trafficking in the United States, I just became very disturbed about what the realities are and how folks in this country don't understand it. And I just really felt a burning need to set the record straight.
Absolutely. So here's some of the things. I had so many accolades that I read about your book, but there were several that really stood out, talking about a long overdue and blunt look at the heart-wrenching life of women forced into sex trafficking in plain sight. This one talking about in Sin City, but it's happening again everywhere, where women are mere pawns in the hands of rich, powerful men. A wake-up call for America. That was from Joe Dunn, former Democratic California state senator. We're going to go to the other end of the aisle from a Democratic California state senator that continued to say that if this doesn't continue to be talked about, it blows up more and more. You have a Republican side that talks about it, and then just went on and on and on. Just unbelievable accolades. What does that mean for you after finishing this book?
Well, it means that this is a bipartisan issue. This is not an issue
Yes.
that is an RD issue. This is an issue that we all need to be addressing. And I of course, I was gratified for the reviews that we received on it. But it's really not about me. It's really not about what I've done. It's really about spreading the word about how important this issue is, and that we need to start addressing it as a society.
And we talk about corruption, and that's part of the title, Corruption in America. And you just mentioned this isn't a political issue. However, someone has to stand up and do something about it. Have you, in your investigative journalism, can you bring a positive spin whatsoever of saying there is movement in this direction?
That's hard to say. I mean, I think every day the word spreads more about what this issue truly involves, and I think people are slowly becoming enlightened about what's inherent with sex trafficking. And I believe the trajectory is very similar to how we as a society have grown more enlightened as it relates to issues of domestic abuse, domestic violence, as well as drug addiction. There was a time where we would dismiss a victim of spousal abuse as just crazy, or we would dismiss a someone who was addicted to drugs as being a throwaway person. We now no longer see those things, and so we now no longer treat people those way. We have more compassion, and my hope is that over time we will have more compassion for victims and survivors of sex trafficking as well.
Absolutely. If you're just tuning in, Brian Joseph, the author of Vegas Concierge. Again, he's in town for an event tonight that will be held at the J. We're going to go deep into this because I find it riveting of how deep you went into this and how you paint the picture. You say something that I think is very powerful, and that is interchanging the words victim and survivor. However, a lot of the women that you talk to don't want to hear themselves as victim. Why do they not want to be categorized as that?
Well, I mean, victim can have a certain stigma to it, and it can sound as though that they're sort of a prisoner to their experience, and they want to they want to transcend that, and I absolutely not only agree with that sentiment, but have a lot of compassion for that sentiment. At the same time, however, it's my belief that so many people in American society don't view these people as victims, as people that deserve compassion. And so it was very important to me to really drive home the point that women engaged in this lifestyle are indeed victims and deserve our compassion as a society.
Absolutely. And Brian talks many times in the book about whether you agree with someone going into prostitution, why they go into that. You really paint the picture, though, of when that ever happens. And you talk about pimps throughout this as well, and what people portray in their minds. Because we're going to go to Hollywood, and Hollywood glamorizing it, and Pretty Woman. Oh, look, Julia Roberts, and look at her life, and look what happened. Taken always comes to mind for me, though. And we think about the father and the daughter, incredible bond. And here she is away with her friend, and she meets this guy who charms her. Is that what you see a lot in what your deep dive was into this trusting factor, or is it the exact opposite?
Well, I think certainly the way you describe Taken is more accurate to what it is in life. That being said, I don't know that a lot of people took that message from Taken. I think a lot of people think of Taken as the title implies, Taken, that she was kidnapped into this lifestyle, and that's not typically what victims and survivors of sex trafficking experience. On the other hand, in reality, what they experience is that they're manipulated into this lifestyle. They're groomed into it. They have a pimp that sweet talks them over a course of days, weeks, or even months, getting them into this lifestyle. It is really a brainwashing, a controlling of the victim, and it can be very subtle, and that's not something that's often depicted in our popular culture.
And the women, and we're going to say men, young girls, young boys that are led into this lifestyle, you also talk about their upbringing or the trauma that they probably experienced. Is that pretty indicative of almost everyone that's in that quote-unquote field?
Well, I certainly don't want to say almost everyone. I mean, I haven't had an opportunity as a journalist to survey the entire field of this population. But in my experience, I think it's safe to say that a large percentage of the people who end up in this lifestyle have previously experienced some very heart-wrenching traumas that anyone would have compassion for. And those traumas they've experienced in their lives long before they ever even considered the notion of turning a trick.
But interesting that you talk about compassion that the world would feel when they hear what their background was, but if they then hear that they are in the field of prostitution, suddenly that compassion turns to, oh, I have shame for you, or why did you get into that? Does it not?
That's absolutely correct. We have such a social stigma around this, and we have such a judgment around who these people are, or who we think these people are, that we just have no desire to, I'm talking as a society, have no desire to have compassion for them, and I just find that very grotesque.
Again, Brian talks about this in Vegas Concierge. You'll find the victims are leather tough and street savvy, and frequently they'll have a bad attitude or be painfully unreliable. For many people, the victims won't seem sympathetic at all, at least not at first. And you say from your research, you encountered victims who were frustrating, flaky, rude, or passive aggressive. They were sometimes unpleasant to be around, but that didn't make them any less deserving of compassion.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to understand how they got to that place in their life and why they're responding in the way that they are. And I think too many people don't consider those things.
So you use pimp and sex trafficker interchangeably. Again, I also said that you talk deep about prostitution and the manipulation that leads women to this profession. Can you go a little bit more in depth in that?
A pimp is a sex trafficker. There's no, we as a society have sanitized that term. it's as though we've sanitized the term Nazi or something. Pimps are awful individuals who are slave masters who control people, and we need to start thinking about them as what they truly are.
And that's so from the research that you did. And again, I stress this is a true story, and we're going to talk about the characters that are in this. But if you look at, you say, a pimp or a sex trafficker, typically what do you think people go to into their minds of who they think that is?
Well, it's hard to say how everybody thinks of that. I can tell you how I previously thought about that. I would think about pop culture depictions. What often came to mind was Will Ferrell's depiction and The Other Guys. Gator was his character, and he was played for laughs. So, someone that was sort of funny and silly. We often think about pimps with their outlandish attire. They don't seem to be scary figures when in fact they are quite scary individuals.
And you talk about the victim in this as someone that was just passed around. And then there's a trust factor, right? So she looked at some pimps as, wow, this is a scary lifestyle. Then being introduced to, oh, well, I'm being pulled. Somebody's pulling up in a Rolls Royce. They're taking me to this beautiful place. And I'm walking in. This is so very different. I trust this. This must be a good way for me to get into this, right? It's this ebb and flow.
Absolutely. No. And this is it's very important for people to understand how coercive this lifestyle can be, and how coercive pimps can be. And pimps will often use their wealth as a way to build trust and to show their legitimacy, when in fact there is no separating a rich pimp from a poor pimp. They're all bad people.
And I mentioned before, we're going to take a break here in just a second, but there are a lot of people who think this does not take place here in St. Louis. However, a lot of people that I've talked to behind the scenes have said, I'm so glad you're addressing this, because one of the things I hope gets across today is that it's prevalent right here in St. Louis. In fact, some people saying that this is a hub. What do you know about that?
I can't say that I know a great deal
Okay.
about that, but I was aware generally that I believe that St. Louis has some sort of status in law enforcement as a hub for this activity, and that makes sense, right? I mean, you have an interstate running through here. You're at the crossroads of the West, of course, and that's makes it just logically speaking a potential hub for trafficking, because there's so many people running in and out of the city.
And so talking to parents, what would you ask them to do in this awareness today, which is what we're doing? What would you ask them to say to their children to bring awareness to this? Because again, you've got young girls, young guys going around. I looked all over TikTok and Instagram last night as I was doing research, having people, whether they think it's scare tactics, because see, some people believe that these videos we see of someone being quote unquote taken in a parking lot, and I won't say it doesn't matter which parking lot, but it was people saying, oh, you are just sensationalizing it, you're just doing scare tactics, this doesn't exist.
It's very important for people to become educated on this issue, and again, so much of the portrayals of this can be just not true to life. It's really important to understand the depictions that you're seeing and how truthful they truly are. The sad fact is there's so much misinformation around this issue, and it's my belief that because of that misinformation, that people are not taking this issue as seriously as they should, or understanding it in the way that they should.
And that is exactly where I wanted to go after the break. The misinformation that's out there. I want you to think about this as we go into the break, Brian, of what you think the top maybe 1, 2, 3 things are out there, of where the misinformation is coming from, who's providing it. Is it the old career I had, or the career that you have, again, in the media? Are we doing a disservice? Where's it coming from, right? And then the corruption aspect, the hip-hop tie, again, the trafficking that's taking place. Mean streets, rural areas, small towns. If you have any questions or comments, I don't want to scare you. I just want to make you aware, and that's what we're doing here today. We'll have more with Brian Joseph when we return.
This lady got me in the best shape of my life. I literally didn't know that I could be in shape like that. But the amount that she pours into her clients, and especially whenever you get the one-on-one training, it's mind-blowing. I mean, it was really life-changing. I learned so much about proper form, about nutrition, about just being able to invest in myself. I hired Monica to be my personal trainer, which was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Discover your full potential with a personalized styling experience. Designing, customizing, and transforming the looks of men and women. Revamp your individual style and embrace what makes you, you. That's real confidence.
And welcome back, 7:31. Welcome in if you're just tuning in. Again, a very powerful show today. I know, like I said, when we're live, some of you may have to rush off, but please come back to this when you can really immerse yourself in just sitting and listening, or maybe you put in your earbuds and you listen and not necessarily watch the show, or you do both. You watch it and then you hear it again and you keep getting the message of, this is out there. What can I do? And that's a really big question that we have to ask. Brian Joseph, again, is my guest. He is the author of Vegas Concierge. He's worked as a newspaper reporter and investigative journalist for about 20 years, writing for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the Orange County Register, the Sacramento Bee, among other publications. Again, a graduate of the University of Missouri, Columbia. And we're talking about how this is a true story. Did you lose your job at the Las Vegas Review-Journal trying to expose the publication?
I did lose my job during this research, yes.
Interesting. Why?
I was told that the paper was unhappy with how quickly or how slowly I was doing my research. If you read the book, you might come to other conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're bringing awareness out. I would tell somebody to give this man a promotion because of what he is doing and making us talk about this. So we went into the break saying, think about 1, 2, or the top 3 things that you can think about that is misinformation. And who's doing that in misinformation? Is it the media?
Broadly, yes. Of course, it's the media. I mean, that's where we receive most of our information today.
But is it mainstream media, or is it social media that we're scrolling, or is it a combination?
I'd say it's both.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are misinformed on this issue. And when I talk about media, it can be both, Hollywood and also, news media. I think Hollywood often plays pimps for laughs and misinterprets the behaviors of women engaged in prostitution. You mentioned Pretty Woman. I mean, Pretty Woman certainly soft pedals this lifestyle quite a lot. But then also on the news media side, I think there's often depictions of this lifestyle that are inaccurate. I think that's largely because understanding this world, takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. And in today's media environment, we don't have the time to really dig into issues and understand them in a way that is important. And certainly, it took me a long time to develop sources in this world and to understand it in a way that was truly genuine.
Well, and again, with me saying that this is a true story, I was just going to ask you that the trust factor to get this type of information out there, how long and hard was that?
It was very difficult. This is not a story that you can do in a week. I mean, this is something that takes a large amount of investment to make happen, and it just took a long time to develop sources, to get people to see that I was interested genuinely in understanding the issue in a real way.
Right, because to get that trust, it's saying, I'm not trying to overall do this broad painting picture of how horrible this lifestyle is, or you should feel shamed. It is more, we need to bring awareness and we need to get ourselves talking. So as a community, what can be done? What can we, because we always say there are things that we can do, all of us as human beings, even though people think, what can I do? What can we do, Brian?
Well, I think in many ways, the general solution to this is very simple. Now, executing that isn't quite as simple, but I think in many ways, the way that you begin to address this is simply to become educated on what this truly looks like, and then having genuine compassion for not only the people in this lifestyle, but for everyone. And if we were all more compassionate and interested in helping other folks, that would begin to erode the pimp prostitute subculture. The problem with that is that we're all, as Americans today, siloed in our own worlds, less interested in each other and less interested in the problems that other people face. If we became, more compassionate towards one another and cared more for one another, that would begin to get us to where we need to be.
Brian doesn't know this, but we end every show, as many of you know, with the whole thing of saying to be kind. That is it, right? Just be kind. And for that matter, get out of your own way while you're going along in your blessed life. Understand what is going on around us. But we also talked about this. Like, you can, in your mind right now, think, my young son, my young daughter, there's no way that they would fall into that. And it will really surprise you when you go back and look at someone who is falling into this category of coming from an affluent lifestyle or coming from being downtrodden. It really runs its course on both sides, right?
Absolutely. And particularly with social media today, pimps and other traffickers have the ability to recruit in more large-scale ways than they ever did before. Before social media, you would typically have to have an in-person conversation in order to begin recruiting someone into this lifestyle. You don't have to have that anymore. Now you can, make connections on Instagram or other social media platforms, and it just becomes much easier for the savvy, manipulative trafficker to find potential people to exploit.
So, Brian, in your investigation of talking to these men and these women, is it the belief at some point that they might get into prostitution from the trafficking aspect, and there's going to be a way for them to find their way out of it, but then they end up realizing that they're drawn in more and more, and that person, that pimp, the person they're a victim to, has completely brainwashed them, and they are stuck in this lifestyle and don't know how to get out?
I think that that's absolutely correct. I don't know exactly at the beginning stages what at the point where they're potential victims, what they really are thinking. If they think, maybe I'll only do this for a short time, that's certainly possible. Or maybe they're so beaten down by life that they just see no other option. I do think it's absolutely true, though, that once they sort of get into this lifestyle, that they find it virtually impossible to get out, because they've been so brainwashed and so led to believe that this is all that they're good for. Which, again, this is something that we should all have compassion for. No one should believe that this is all that they're good for, but yet that's what these pimps and other traffickers do to their victims.
And again, something that I also found interesting, did not know until going deep into Brian's book, with sex trafficking laws now on the books. By the way, didn't become a criminal law in Vegas until 2013, which really shocked me. Prosecutors trying to find a way to charge a pimp with sex trafficking, which typically carries much harsher penalties than pandering. You would have thought that would have happened a long, long time ago. That's only, 12 years ago?
It's very disturbing, yes. This is not an issue that has been a priority for many policymakers. Why
do you think?
It's at the margins. I mean, we are talking about it being, quite an epidemic in the United States, and it is. But it's also something that we've pushed to the sides of our society, and it's something that a lot of people just don't want to look at.
So we talk a lot about big pharma and corruption in government with regards to medicine. I mean, obviously, we all know what just happened, unfortunately, the horrific thing with the United CEO. However, the corruption exists everywhere. Do you think the reason why it took so long for this type of a law to be enacted is the in-bed aspect of some parts of, we look at law enforcement, which you talk about in the book, we talk about politicians, and it's, hey, well, let's back this off because there's money being handed over from one to the other.
It's hard to say, to be able to generalize that for why that might be in every community across the country, but certainly in Nevada and Las Vegas. Nevada is a company state. Vegas is a company town, and that company is, of course, the casino business. And the casino business, whether it wants to directly address this or not, has some sort of relationship with trafficking in the United States. And I don't mean to imply that casinos are actively trafficking people. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that casinos want to protect their clientele. They don't want to see their clients arrested. They want to see them on their floors gambling, and the sad fact is that in the United States, we view Vegas as a playground where adults can go to, where we can do anything that we want, and including many people go there believing that the purchase of sex is legal in Vegas, and casinos have no incentive to dissuade them of that fact. And so there is a sort of tendency. I don't want to be too there is a tendency to turn a blind eye to these sort of things. I want to be clear, though, that that I don't believe that every casino employee is that way, or that every casino is that way. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but yes, I mean there is a generally a sort of a sense and an incentive certainly to turn a blind eye to these things.
And we're looking at it right there, Sin City. There's a lot of people, again, there's some incredible things that come out of Las Vegas, but then other people say, I want to stay away because I'm fearful of what may happen here, right? So 7:41, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk deeper about trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, corruption, the hip hop tie. We all right now for the last several months have been talking about what's all over the headlines with whatever he's calling himself these days. What is he calling himself? Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy? Don't know. He's behind bars, though, and everyone's glued to who's the next celebrity that's going to be tied to him. But that was all taking place, and no one wanted to talk about it. So we're going to talk more about that. Again, the book, Vegas Concierge, and we'll put it on the screen for you one more time, and then again at the end of how you can go to the talk tonight, because Brian's going to go more in depth into this, and you'll have a chance to do your own Q&A. It's at the St. Louis Jewish Community Center tonight, starting at 7 o'clock, ending at 8:30. That's the Performing Arts Center on the Millstone Campus Drive. And again, you have all the information in your moderation as well. You can just click on and purchase your tickets. Please do so. You need to not turn a blind eye to this and a deaf ear to this. We need to start talking and then figure out how can we bring more and more awareness to this very serious topic. More with Brian Joseph when we return.
One of our things we always say is we want everybody to leave with a smile.
Oh, and trust me, they do. I've seen a lot of smiles here today. There's so many levels of why you will love these ladies, but giving back to the community, supporting the community, collaborating with other businesses.
Base pace. Now we give parameters here. Power walkers generally use incline. Yeah, I know.
Go, girls, go!
Because you're not only getting some great local roasted coffee, you're getting good people.
Good people is what it's about. And by the way, that person who turned up their nose, karma is that you know what.
Everyone needs to be kind. And it starts really with the adults, and then it goes down because we're the ones that are instilling this in our children, in our families, and everything thereafter.
We are live on location, and this is the really cool thing. This is exactly what we can do from your business. We call it Mobile Monica. You know I'm always on the move. 7:43, welcome back to the Real Monica Adams Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have any comments or questions about what we're talking about today, some of you might just sit there and just listen, and that's okay. But then I would like for you to absorb it and maybe come back and listen to it again and then start talking. And that's what we're asking, is that this opens up conversation. Brian Joseph, again, my guest, the author of Vegas Concierge, a longtime journalist, again, from University of Missouri, Columbia, and for the last 2 decades has worked in journalism as a reporter and then went into the investigative side. We're talking again about Vegas Concierge, but I wanted to have you all listen to the fact that this is happening everywhere. So we talked about this. Some business interests, particularly casinos, seem to view efforts to combat sex trafficking as a threat to their bottom line. These business interests don't deny that sex trafficking is existing. They just don't seem to really want to deal with it. It also doesn't help that hip-hop stars who have adopted the style of pimps have become pitchmen for major household brands, and we are glorifying them, are we not?
Absolutely. Now, I want to be very clear that as we tread into the issue of hip hop, that I found nothing in my research to suggest that hip hop is to blame for sex trafficking or that there's anything intrinsic to hip hop and the exploitation of women. That being said, hip hop is a major genre in the United States today. It is a major cultural force, and many people have become wealthy as a result of it. And as a result, you see typically in as it relates to exploitation of any type, that when there are powerful people, they tend to exploit people, or they can tend to exploit people, and that's what we are seeing in some cases in hip hop.
And then that power they hold over others. These victims, these survivors, as again, Brian uses those words synonymously in the book. So I mentioned going into the break that everyone's now glued to it. So this is the part that they are bringing awareness to. Oh my gosh, everybody, it's like water cooler talk. Did you hear the latest? Who's the next person? Why is everybody fleeing the country? Originally it was, if Donald Trump comes into office, we're leaving the country. Now it's no. We think that they're all leaving because they're the next person that might be tied to it. Now, suddenly, and maybe it's a good thing because we are discussing this, but he's in jail and we have no idea how many more are going to be tied to him. But this is the talker. Finally, we're discussing it.
We are, and that's good. Sadly, I feel like the way that it's being talked about is more of a salacious sort of way. It's not being talked about in a heartfelt, focused on the victims and survivors way, and that can be very frustrating for victims and survivors when the conversation is primarily focused on their exploiters, on their abusers, and so I would like to see that conversation, that national dialogue change to be focused more on the people that we should care about, the victims and survivors in these cases.
We absolutely should, and unfortunately, what I think happens all too often is, we are going to put them in this major light, them being the hip hop artists and the celebrities, and then these people who want to come forward but are so fearful because the other ones hold so much weight that they don't. We think about the Me Too movement, and I think about what was the movie Bombshell? Right. So I'm going to tell you, in my 30-year career, did that happen? Yes. Was I in my voice squashed because you think there's a powerful man above you? It happened to a lot of us, men and women. I want you to understand that. And so when people came out and went, here we go, all these women, Me Too, it's unfortunately those victims and survivors you talk about, who knows how many in this world will never come forward because they feel ashamed and they feel like no one's going to listen to me.
That's absolutely correct, and that's so tragic. What's interesting to me is, we think about someone like Jeffrey Epstein. Can you name a Jeffrey Epstein victim? I can't off the top of my head, and I believe that's the case because the victims in that situation didn't feel comfortable, owning their voice and speaking their truth because they felt they'd be judged in society, and that's tragic. That's not the society that I want to raise my child in, and that's not the society I want to live in.
Absolutely. And Michelle did some research, by the way. There are a couple of organizations, one of which, our dear friend Abby Stahlschmidt, who was just on with us, she has regularly gone out on her social media saying, we have got to talk about this. There's Own Your Voice Academy. And ourrescue.org. So look into those. Again, we have organizations that are trying to bring more and more awareness about this. So we're going to talk about the victims as well as the pimps. So Vegas Concierge offers this gripping look into the corruption on the streets of Sin City, with the main corruption coming from Molly Mall, a reality TV star and hip-hop producer who has worked with Drake and Justin Bieber. Despite his fame, he was in real life a ruthless pimp who exploited women and stole their earnings. And then Angela, who managed to escape the clutches, victimized by everyone that she felt she could trust. Again, painting the picture here. So these, and obviously there's many, many more in the book, but who would you, as people are reading this, when they come out of reading Vegas Concierge, what do you want them to think about the investigation that you did into, what is it again, Molly Mall? I looked at it and said Molly Mall and Angela, which is just one of many victims.
I want them to think that these are real people, that these are not caricatures, that these are real people, and that as it relates to Angela, that this is someone that I should have compassion for, and that this is a real person that I if I encountered someone in a similar situation, that I would want to help, and as it relates to Molly Mall and other people like him, that their glitter and glamour should not disguise the evil that lurks beneath.
Yeah, you talk about pimps being master manipulators who use psychology to bind their victims in invisible chains and control them. That's very powerful.
Yes, thank you. That's an accurate statement. That's what is truly happening in these situations.
Again, you can look at the physical, tangible side of when you hear the word someone being bound in chains. These are invisible chains. And when it starts and they're drawn in, this is, I'm asking all of you parents to not be fearful by today, but be aware of it. And then just look at the lifestyle that is in the upbringing of these young kids and then how they are manipulated once they're into this. A common sensibility about American pimps that white women are the most desirable and therefore have the greatest earning potential. As the pimp Tavon Banks, a black man, once told a YouTube channel that posted interviews with pimps, quote, "If she ain't white, she ain't right." That's the mentality.
Yes, I mean there is a as I understand it, a widespread belief in the pimp culture that that white women are the highest value and highest earners.
Well, that's seen in the movie Taken as well, right? And the bidding keeps going higher and higher and higher. These wealthy men that are, bidding and bidding and bidding to try to get her. At the same time, though, when we think about hip hop, typically your mind will go to black, but in the pimps, it's both colors, all ethnicities. That's the other thing I need you all to understand.
Absolutely, and in fact, there are examples of traffickers, being women as well.
Yeah, exactly. But people right away are going to think, oh, and again, the shame that we'll probably do 100 Days to Freedom from shame today, the shame goes into shame on them, these men that are manipulating our young children. But then it is, they were young boys and girls at some point. How did they ever go into that lifestyle? That's a whole nother book that you need to write.
It is. I think, there's some serious, psychological issues there, which is not to say, however, that they shouldn't be held accountable for their behavior, and they absolutely should be.
So in the Q&A tonight that will take place at the J, what are you hoping people will ask? Because sometimes people just, like they are maybe right now, if they're not asking any questions, that they're just watching. What can we do beyond the watch? How do we even begin to broach this subject and start to talk about it?
It is hard. It is very hard, and at least in part in how we put this book together, it was the hope that it would serve as sort of a starting place to have these sort of conversations. I would hope that that folks tonight come with an open heart and be willing to ask whatever's on their mind. I know people sometimes are hesitant to ask questions because they don't want to offend or don't know how to word it. Let us tell you, hey, that's maybe not the right way to word it. We can be gentle about it. But the only way that we can have conversations is to begin to have them. And so I would just hope that folks would not feel intimidated or shy from asking what's on their mind and begin to have that dialogue, because that's the only way that we're going to move forward, is by actually engaging with this in a meaningful way.
And I think you'd be surprised as you start to talk about it that others are like, oh, I want to talk about that. I've heard about that in the media. Where's this taking place? And as I mentioned earlier, there are people who are saying that St. Louis is a hub, as Brian said, that he understands that. I'm thinking sometimes maybe people don't start the conversation for fear of judgment, of saying, well, why would you talk about that? Do you know someone? Ooh, scandalous.
I think that's absolutely correct. And again, it speaks to the amount of social stigma and judgment that is attached to these issues. And I think that's a huge barrier to addressing it.
Again, I don't want to give too much away of the book. I want you to read and understand these characters. A stark portrait of the dangers, the dramas, and obviously the sometimes deaths of the participants involved in the world, as well as the real lives of the people behind the personas. You'll be able to go more in depth with Brian tonight. I hope you go to this. And if not, I hope you take this show, and I just hope that you start talking about it, because that's really what we need to do. Corruption, hip hop, trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, things that are happening. It's really scary sometimes when I read these things, Brian, on social media, of just how powerful some of these people are, and then the more gluttonous that they become, of how deep they get into that lifestyle and where it can go. I mean, in our minds, could it possibly get worse? Great slide, by the way. Human trafficking, suburbs, rural towns, cities. It can happen to anyone, no matter your race, no matter your age, no matter your gender. We've got to get that across to everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a with technology, with social media, with the way we travel today, this can happen anywhere.
And well, yeah, speaking of traveling, I mean, that's the biggest thing that people get scared about. I just went to Italy and all I kept hearing from everyone was, oh, be careful of this, be careful of that. Put your, make sure that you and your husband both have your money and everything right in front of you, and then just be aware. But I think that's in life. My husband's a lieutenant with the county police. And so it's always, Monica, you have to have your head on a swivel. But we become very trusting. Somebody stops you. Like this thing I saw, I told you on social media last night, was someone being asked inside of a store that they ran into about, hey, do you have a so-and-so color car? Is this your license plate? Oh, it's getting ready to be towed. And of course you would trust that, like, wait, what? Yeah. And then there was like some kind of a receipt that was handed to the person. And then they went to like take it and put it inside the car. There's things that are laced in it. It's, oh my gosh, this stuff is happening in our world. And when will it stop? Or what's the next thing that someone thinks about to take our young kids away? And suddenly, that life that you thought was so blessed and everything was going well, your whole life gets turned upside down.
It can be very scary. I mean, I certainly relate to feeling the story that you just told. Gosh, my car's gonna be towed. I need to react.
Right.
And again, I think that speaks to the fact that we've lost some of our compassion for our fellow man, and certainly there've always been hustlers in the world, but I'd like to think that in the past, if we saw somebody getting harassed or getting hustled, that we might step in and try to help our fellow person, and that's just not happening as much as I'd like to think it should be.
Absolutely, and I think that is the most powerful message we can leave with is if you're seeing something and you think that someone is distraught or in distress, that you're like, hey. And by the way, always follow your gut. This woman also made a comment on the post and said that something almost happened to her and her daughter where she saw this car. And again, you have this inner voice that says, that doesn't seem right. And sure enough, got in their car, heard this kind of clunking noise. She rolled her down her window, looked out, and there was something wrong with the tire. She knew, however, inside not to pull over immediately, drove as far as she could until she couldn't any longer, pulled into a restaurant parking lot, went inside immediately, and called and saw an SUV pull up with darkened windows that pulled right alongside, and they were looking around. There was a person in the front seat. This is awareness, folks. Person in the front seat, person in the back seat, no one in the passenger seat. She thought that was strange as well. Again, all these things that kept bringing of, well, this is weird, this is weird, this is weird. When the tow truck came, that car immediately sped out of there, and she's like, I knew something would have happened really bad to us. And again, this exists out there, so follow those gut instincts, that other message inside of you. Again, if you're faith-based, it's a warning from above, is what I believe. But these things are happening, and it's just, if we can bring awareness today for you to understand and talk, that's the greatest thing we can do. Get help. Report trafficking, as you see there. National Human Trafficking Hotline, 24/7, toll-free, confidential, 200-plus languages. You can call that number. You can text, live chat, humantraffickinghotline.org, and other incredible organizations that are saying we must talk about this. And he will be tonight, by the way. We'll put it on the screen for you one more time. At the J, thank you, by the way, for bringing Brian in for this. The St. Louis Jewish Book Festival. Brian Joseph, Vegas Concierge. It's tonight starting at 7 o'clock and going through 8:30. There's a Q&A that will take place. And again, you don't have to say anything tonight, but hopefully you do say some things moving forward and just start talking about it. Brian, thank you. I can't wait to read the rest of the book.
Appreciate
because
that.
what
Thank
I've
you.
read in the 70 pages so far was very riveting. I just had to finally get to sleep. And I can't wait to go beyond that. It's going to be a quick read for you, and then after it, I don't want it to dampen your spirits. I just want you to understand the awareness of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And again, we always end our show with a devotional, 100 Days to Freedom. I'm going to do shame today. It hasn't been done in a while. It just feels like it's a connection because there's a lot of people that go into any parts of this lifestyle that feel shame, and that's why they don't discuss. We'll do that when we return. So faith, a big part of the show. And if you're new to the show, by the way, welcome aboard and tell others. Every morning we're here for you, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. At the very end of the show, I always bring faith back into it to tie it in and just try to give you some hope, right? Instead of starting your day and having you kick it off with negativity, it's giving you some hope. So these books, they're called 100 Days to Freedom. This one's from Shame. It's a daily devotional from Stephen Arterburn. Instead of reading all 100 from one particular category, we know that they all go together. There's depression, overeating, anger, fear, and anxiety. Today, Shame felt like it fit. Honoring God. Put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. And we talked about evil a lot today. It's Ephesians 6, by the way, verse 13. Consider for a moment the servant of God who has fallen into sin and is battling shame. Maybe it's you. Perhaps you've been a pastor, an associate pastor, a Bible teacher, or the leader of a great ministry in your church. You had the respect of people because you earned it with faithful service over a period of years. But now you feel lost. The church has removed you from your post. How will you ever be able to honor God with your talents in the future? Won't people think of your sin every time they look at you? Well, first, you must stop thinking in terms of your service and your image and your ministry. Thinking primarily of yourself is likely how you got into trouble in the first place. Set your focus on God. Instead of worrying about what people will think of you, it's time to make what He thinks your priority. Have you ever heard the phrase, what other people think of you is none of your business? And the more you understand that and really sit with that and let it marinate, your life will be so much better. Trust me on that. That's something I pass along as a life coach. No one should care what others think about them. I know it's hard as humans, but you get to that place, boy, is it a powerful place to walk. God is not thinking about your future in ministry. He's focused on your heart. Whether you ever preach another sermon or teach another class pales in comparison to whether you learn to live in submission to His will. That's truly what He's concerned about. God is best honored not in the dazzling display of our talents in His church, but in the daily surrender of our hearts to His will. Even if you never serve in a leadership position in church again, you will honor God to His heart content if you just submit yourself to His will from this day forward. And you can take that, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent, whatever your role is. If you were taken out of something, do you start to shame yourself? Do you think others around you are shaming you? Oh, so-and-so lost their job. What did they do? No. Go back. If you haven't prayed, maybe you find your way to it. Meditate, find some clarity. Again, if this feels so foggy, I don't know how you can exist in life. We got to find our way to your clearest path. Robert Morgan says, every time we resist the slightest temptation, we honor God. So here's today's prayer. Lord, thank you for the gifts and abilities you've given me, but help me to remember that they mean little if I don't back them up with obedience. Good one. This one again, 100 Days to Freedom from Shame. And you can find these books from our friend Stephen Arterburn. Thank you all so very much for tuning in today. And if you were able to watch live, fantastic. Thanks for sticking with us. If not, do us a favor, share this now with all of your friends and family all over your own social channels and get people talking. That's what it's all about. We thank Brian Joseph, the author of Vegas Concierge, for being our guest today. And as you heard us both say, being compassionate, being aware, being kind. That is the greatest thing that you can do in life. Show kindness. Don't shame those that you're hearing in these fields that you think that they automatically chose. It's the walk and the path that led to that. Then understand the compassion will go a long way. And you hear it all wrapped up in a beautiful bow, which is to be kind. God bless you all. Have a beautiful day.